Attention darts fans, after searching high and low, to and fro, from coast to coast on wine and toast, the award for best hashtag in the game goes to Dynamite Darts Content. And your winner is the weekly Dartscast, baby. 3 words, Dynamite Darts Content. Enjoy the show.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of the weekly Dartscast. I'm Alex Moss and alongside me it is Mr. Hang Tight himself, Burton DeWitt. How are you doing?
Just been hanging tight as always. How are you, Alex?
I'm doing good, thank you. Can't complain. A weekend when Colchester and Stowmarket have both won. As I said before, it doesn't happen very often, so you've got to enjoy it while you can. But with the darts, we've got a lot to discuss, haven't we? We've got the Challenge Tour we're going to look back on in a moment. We're going to look ahead to the main tour season for the PDC, the Masters, some listener questions, and we've got 3 great guests coming up on the show. But let's get into darts that we have seen this past weekend, and that being the first weekend of the Challenge Tour. Scott Williams becoming only the 3rd player to win 2 Challenge Tour events on the same day. How impressed were you with him and the other 3 title winners in Milton Keynes?
I mean, I think what you said right at the beginning there sums up everything that needs to be said about Scott Williams, and that's just how phenomenal a day it was. It's something that it's only happened twice before, and it's not like this is something that's happened every few years. It happened twice in 2014, and now we had to wait not 8 full years because he went and did it on the very first day, but nearly 8 full years for someone else to do it. And it almost was he was getting better as the day went along. Instead of showing fatigue, he just seemed to get more and more dominant. And there were really few opportunities for anyone to knock him off. And, you know, Robert Owen, who made the final in the first event, had a very good day, but he was never in that match. Lee Evans in the second final, same thing. It was just a dominant day from Scott Williams. To win, was it 15 matches or 16 matches on the spin like that? Not many people can say they've done that in any level of competition. And he went and did it on the very first day and has already won more prize money as a result of that than the person who topped the table, Jim Williams, did all of last season. Granted, it was a shorter Challenge Tour season than normal. I mean, I should say for the UK Challenge Tour, obviously. In the European one, there was more prize money won by Matt Campbell. But at least in the UK one, he did better than anyone did last year across the entire event. And he had to compete against not just the players from the UKQ school, but the players from both. Of the other winners, you know, a lot of flack given to Steve Haggerty because statistically, he was nowhere near the best player on the day, but he found a way to win each match. His highest average was still 4 points lower than his final opponent's Halpai Pua's lowest average, and nearly 10 points lower than Pua's second lowest. And in the final, he was 9 points below Pua, but he found a way to win over the course of the day. But I really was impressed with Pua throughout the day. I mean, he averaged over 90 in every match and usually well above it, stringing together, even though it was a runners-up performance, a very worthy day from him. And one of the better days you'll see from a player on the Challenge Tour, at least who goes more than 1 or 2 matches. He's shown that when we knew he had the game, he showed that he can bring it in PDC competition as he gets match sharp. And we'll see if he gets onto the Pro Tour and is able to compete, great. If not, we'll see him at the next couple sets of Challenge Tour events. But he's going to be a worthy competitor. Unfortunately, I had to head out Saturday afternoon, so I didn't follow as much for the second final. But I do want, so I'll say Stu Wilson, great on winning it. But I actually didn't follow that event as closely. But I did follow on the Sunday, and Jim McEwen absolutely deserves a mention because as dominant as Halpai Pua was up until the final, Jim McEwen was even more dominant over the course of the day. In 8 matches, he dropped 9 legs. And 3 of those were to Colin Osborne. 3 were in another match. He had 2 5-3 wins, and the other 6 matches he won by a combined score of 30-3. You're not going to ever see that in any level of PDC competition. Even though this isn't, the Pro Tour, it's the Challenge Tour, that doesn't matter. You're not going to see that level of complete absurdity over a course of a day. 30-3 for 6 matches, and the other 2 were 5-3. So overall, 40 of the 49 legs he contested, he won. And that's why he lifted the title. That is almost as impressive as Scott Williams winning both titles on the first day, if not more so, because of just how dominant he was in that one event.
Yeah, that would have been a good question of the week. What's more impressive, winning 2 Challenge Tour titles on the same day, or doing what Jim McEwen did and winning a Challenge Tour title on that final day and dropping just 9 legs in 8 matches. Both are pretty impressive achievements, aren't they? And I'll start with the player that won those first 2 titles on the Friday, the first ones of the year, Scott Williams, someone that we've seen start to make strides in darts, especially at this level, the level when you're starting to head towards the amateur semi-pro level, towards the professional level. We saw him win through the playoffs to get in what was the last BDO World Championship in 2020, and we've seen him, like a lot of other players, playing on the online league over the last year, which has been a godsend for a lot of players to have that opportunity to play a lot of matches against a lot of quality players on a stream. It's been great experience for these players, and Scott Williams to come through the field twice in a day like he did. And you mentioned that stat there as well that I first saw from Dan Hutchinson on Twitter. Give him a shout out. But yeah, to get more prize money than Jim Williams did in 2 events compared to, it was only 12 events last year, that is what the stat of the year so far for me anyway. But yeah, what can you say about what he did on that first day? I mean, even the first game, he was 4-3 down against Andrew Hyland, pulls out a 13 darter and a 15 darter to win it 5-4, and then goes on to win 9 matches in that first event. He played in the last 512, one of the players that didn't get that bye through to the second round, then goes through the field in the second event. Looked like he was going to start to do it on the third event as well. He won his first game, but he mismatched darts in the second game. So I think he had around a 17-18 match winning streak to start off the Challenge Tour. Then he kind of ran out of steam for the rest of it, but he's in a very strong position, like all the other winners, aren't they? They're in the top 4 on that Challenge Tour order merit, and you've got to say, if either of them miss out on getting in the Pro Tour next week, they will be very unfortunate, because I think we will see some players not enter those first few events. There'll probably be around 8 to 12 players that will miss it. So we expect to see all the winners get in, players that did perform well but didn't pick up a title. You'd expect to see them in there. And Steve Haggerty, as you said, he wasn't a performance that we're going to be writing home about, but every credit to him, what he was able to do. And he finished the weekend 135th on the averages. If you'd have said that to him at the start of the weekend and said you're going to come home with a title, $2,000 and whatever else you got from the weekend, he wouldn't have believed you. But that just goes to show that the games aren't over until they're over, and it is about getting, former world number 1 said, right shots at the right time. And I was looking back at his final against Halpo Pua, and he had a 140 checkout, a 108 checkout, all the 9 legs going with throw. And to hold throw for those 5 legs, even when your opponents miss chances to break you, that shows that he has got something there. So looking forward to seeing what he can do on the Pro Tour. That'll be a great experience for him. And Stu Wilson as well had some great performances in there. He didn't go as close as Steve Haggerty did, but he did have 5 games that went 5-3, so he was pushed quite a lot on that way to the title. And then lastly, Jim McEwen, I don't know what else there is to say, really. I mean, he's probably unlucky that he didn't get more from the weekend, because he had a semi-final on the first day, quarter-final on the second day, lost with a 96 average in one of the events. And I remember last year we talked about the Challenge Tour. He was unlucky to be pulled from one of the events because there was that player that tested positive for COVID, and he was on a really good run that day. So it's good to see him come back and pick up another title and get that chance from the Pro Tour next week.
Indeed, and some talk, though, on social media over the weekend about how the Challenge Tour is structured. As I'm sure everyone knows, it's a complete random draw each day, no seeds. Anyone could have to play that extra match or have that bye, depending on the number of people in the field. But do you think there should maybe be seedings introduced on the Challenge Tour going forward?
I think it's something that should probably at least be discussed or looked at by the PDC. I don't know whether they'll go through with it or not, but I was having to think about this over the weekend, because it was something that was brought up on social media. It comes around with the Challenge Tour. I know they've tinkered with the format over the last couple of years. Of course, last year split between the UK and Europe, so there was less of a big field like there was this year. In the first weekend, we had almost 300 players play at the weekend, and we've seen 2 events on a Friday, 2 events Saturday, and just the 1 event on the Sunday. So there is that early finish for players that do have work on the Monday. They can get back in a reasonable time. But yeah, I think it's something that I'd like to see, and we're seeing with the Challenge Tour now. And I know our good friend, our colleague Matthew Kiernan, he's been saying it for a long time. When is the prize money going to go up for the Challenge Tour? And it's never gone up for a long time. And one of our listeners, Bertie Hastings, said that the Challenge Tour, they should stop doing 2 events a day and double the money, make it 1 event a day. Maybe that's a way forward. But with these things as well, you've got to think about what the uptake is going to be like, because with these Challenge Tour events, the players are still paying to play. So it is a good money spinner for the PDC, but there are also those benefits for the players that the top players will get a chance to play on the Pro Tour, get a chance to play the UK Open, and of course the big goal at the end of it, the big prize, the World Championship spot and the 2-year tour card. So there is something in it for the players, of course, to play for, but it's their room to make the Challenge Tour even better. And I think seeding could be the way forward. And one of the ideas I thought of, there's probably better ideas out there, but it was to maybe mirror what we have with the Pro Tour. They've got a rolling 12-month order of merit, which decides the 32 seeds for the Players' Championship events and the 16 seeds for the Euro Tour events. Why don't we have a 12-month rolling Challenge Tour, Pro Tour, whatever you want to call it, order of merit, where we have maybe 32 players, maybe 16 players. They get seeded through to the bracket, so that the top player on that list is top of the draw, and the second seed is in the bottom half of the draw. So those better players, if you like, the more players that have done better over the last 12 months, they do get a little bit of reward, and they are separated, and they might get a more fortunate draw, because we have seen players at the weekend, and we see it every weekend, that get nasty draws for 3, 4, maybe even 5 events to kick things off. And we want to see the best players go up against each other. And I think maybe having the seeding structure in place, we could see those matchups more often.
Yeah, it's a good question, but I'll come down on the other side and say that I don't think it should be seeded. That idea of the 12-month rolling order of merit is a good one, but the counterpoint to that is at the start of every season, you're going to have a bunch of players who are dropping onto the Challenge Tour as a result of having lost their tour card. So they'll be on nil for the Challenge Tour order of merit, even though they might have been just a few weeks earlier number 66, 67 in the world and just barely lost their tour card. I don't know if that's necessarily fair to make them be so far behind the players who, based on result, weren't good enough to have played on the main tour the previous year. And therefore, that was the only reason why they were doing the Challenge Tour compared to the players who just lost their tour cards. But the counterpoint to that, or I guess which now becomes a counterpoint, is there is not going to be any perfect scenario. You could do maybe based on the Q school order of merit. But again, then you have separate Q schools between UK and Euro. And how do you account for that? Do you treat all points equally? Do you do some alternating system? How do you decide who's the 1 seed, who's the 2? And then do you switch over to some sort of order of merit after maybe the first weekend or something? There are ideas that could be floated, but none of them are perfect. The random draw does add some of that excitement. We saw it, of course, last year, where in the very first round, out of 150 people in the building, you had the Win Stanleys draw each other in their first round. That might happen anyway with a random draw, but it becomes a little less likely if maybe one of them will be seeded. Obviously, neither of them did Q School this year, but next year. I like the random draw. It makes sure that anyone can get anyone in any given day. And yes, some people end up with very unfortunate draws. Yet again, Jelle Clausen, since I mentioned it for Q School last week, he had some very difficult draws for a second match in the Challenge Tour. He would go out with 85, 90 averages while you're seeing people in the 70s go head-to-head. But that's the luck of the draw. His luck changed for his last couple matches, and that will also happen to other people. Someone who might get a more fortunate draw on day 1 and day 2 might come through on the third day and get a first-round matchup with the person who he just beat in the semifinals, or she just beat in the semifinals the day before. I like that any matchup is possible, and being that I don't think there's any perfect way or any really good way even to do the seeding, I'm perfectly fine just having it be a blind draw where anyone can draw anyone at any given time.
Now we'll move on to our first guest on this show, and it is a chat with the co-owner of the H&L Sports Management, Mick Lang.
I'm joined today by Mick Lang, the co-owner of H&L Sports Management. Mick, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing well, and thanks for joining us. A lot to catch up on since we last had you on the show way back in July 2020. It feels like a different world at this point. But what have the last 18 months been like as a darts manager, going through the behind closed doors era of darts now as we hopefully return towards normality?
Well, travel obviously hasn't been very easy. Keeping abreast of how we can get different players from different parts of the world into the UK and back out again hasn't been the easiest. For instance, there's been times at tournaments where travel restriction rules have changed 3 or 4 times within a tournament. But it's just been really keeping abreast of everything that's happening in each country and just getting on with it. But what the PDC have pulled off over the last 2 years has been nothing short of miracle, really. And what I've had to deal with is very limited as far as what the PDC have had to deal with. So, we've just been able to get on with it and deal with the problems as they come.
That's a very positive take on how you're supposed to handle it, and good on you for that. Your most high-profile player in your stable, of course, is Mensur Suljovic. How did he find that period of events with no fans and playing in the bubbles that they had to put on to make sure the tour could continue?
I think he dealt with it quite well. I mean, whether it's a crowd or not, I don't think Mensur really bothers. I think he's quite happy playing in front of a crowd or without a crowd. So, I don't think it was too much of a problem for him, to be fair, as it was for most players.
A big talking point during the Worlds at the end of 2020 was Tablegate involving Mensur and Gary Anderson. How much did that hurt Mensur, especially because I remember you saying, we've heard him say about how much he respects Gary.
Yeah, he respects Gary immensely and still does. I mean, I think there was a lot made of it when really it was nothing. You probably heard the background of it. I mean, when you were building up before these tournaments, they kind of were supposed to tell you which table to go to. Mensur didn't know, or they didn't tell him, or he didn't hear it. So he asked when he got on stage, and whoever the referee was that night, can't remember who it was, pointed him towards that table. So as far as he was concerned, he didn't do anything wrong. It was a simple mistake. I think Gary blew quite a lot of proportion, to be fair. One table, another table, doesn't really matter, does it really?
Definitely not. And moving on to last year, we saw Mensur take a few months off from the tour, withdrew from the match play, but came back just before the World Cup. Was there ever any fear, though, that he might not return to the tour?
Yeah, it was kind of close. I mean, he's been dealing with a few back injuries over the last sort of couple of years, and we've been trying to deal with that. If it gets a little bit worse, then maybe pull out of a tournament here and there. Just before the match play, it got really bad. He actually probably requires a few operations to sort it out. So, we're just managing it as well as we can at the moment. There's days where it's really difficult for him to play, and that's just a feature of the problem. So we try and manage it as best as possible. Players get injuries all the time, but you got to remember Mensur's one of these kind of players that has to train. I think he said it quite a lot in the past, where he's not a natural talent; he has to train. So he puts in a lot of work to get where he is. Sort of 4 or 5 hours a day, and this injury hasn't helped because he can't really do that anymore. He's limited to maybe 1.5 hours, 2 hours a day, which really isn't keeping him where he wants to be. So we have to manage it a little bit better. But like I say, sometimes some days he feels great. The old Mensur, sometimes it causes him a problem, but we manage it as best as possible.
Well, one of those days, or I guess a couple of those days, was that second event back at the World Cup alongside Rowby-John Rodriguez, as the Austrian team went all the way to the final. Although they fell short at the final hurdle, how special was that weekend?
It was probably one of the best weekends I've been involved in darts. I mean, going into the tournament, we had Mensur's back problem to deal with. Rowby's daughter has a heart problem, and she was due an operation. So, going into that weekend, both players had other things on their mind, to be fair. But we took it one game at a time, and as the weekend got on, it was the epitome of what the World Cup is about. Both players helping each other out when they needed it. I mean, Rowby certainly helped them out and got them through the first round. then Mensur sort of showed the form that makes him the great player he is in the second and third rounds. But Rowby upped his game as well, which seen him make that massive run into the final. And I think the final was a little bit of a letdown considering what they'd achieved up to that point. But it takes nothing away from what they did that weekend. It was an amazing weekend, and probably like I said earlier, probably my best experience of darts at the weekend. Considering everything going into the weekend, not expecting really very much, and to get to the final was just wonderful. And for both of them, such a great achievement. They both love representing the country, and get to the final was a brilliant achievement for both of them.
Of course, and we'll come back to Rowby in a bit, but one more question on Mensur. After the World Cup, made a final on the Euro Tour, but a bit of a quiet last few months, early exits in Minehead and the World Championships. How is Mensur feeling heading into the new season in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, he's quite upbeat at the moment. He's had a good break after the World Championships. He's with the end of last year, the pandemic hasn't been good to him really. That traveling, being stuck in hotels. Mensur loves being with his family. That's his first priority in life. So being away for longer than we would normally be hasn't helped him too much. But with travel restrictions starting to ease a little bit, maybe we can fly back and forward like we used to before the pandemic. I think that'll help him out massively. He's fallen down the rankings a little bit, but I think that's got a lot to do with the couple of years that he had where he was riding on the crest of wave of everything. And the Euro Tour not being played didn't help him because probably Mensur's best form is shown on Euro Tour. So if we get the Euro Tour back to normal this year, I see him going back up the rankings. He's quite confident he could do that as well. Obviously, we have to keep an eye on his injury problem and manage it as best as we can. That we can play and practice as often as he would like to get up there again. So yeah, I think he's fairly positive he could have a great year this year.
Now you have another player who'll be hoping to move up the rankings this year. So we'll have a few questions about him. Rowby-John Rodriguez. Now, at the end of 2020, lost his tour card and fell just short of winning it back at Q School. We spoke to him during the summer, and he said that he felt like it was a blessing in disguise. Given the year he went on to have last year, do you feel like that as well?
Yeah, I think Rowby's been probably one of the most unlucky players in the PDC over the last couple of years as far as tour cards are concerned. I mean, he lost his tour card, circumstances going into the end of the season. He lost the last game going into the qualifier to the Grand Slam. Lost the last game for the qualifier for the World Championships. If he'd won one of them games, he'd have probably kept his tour card. He didn't, of course, but we arrived at Q School. He had an injury going into that, probably about 2 or 3 days where he probably couldn't play to the best of his ability. So the last day of Q School last year was all in, give it as much as you can. He fell short a little bit, didn't get his tour card, but went on to have probably the best year of his career, and showed that this guy could probably be one of the top players in the world, given the chance. Winning the tour card last week helped get him back into the fold again, and I think these next 2 years are going to be huge for him. Everybody knows the ability that Rowby's got, but sometimes and he doesn't practice as often as he should. That's going to change. He's going to start training every day. He's got a routine that he's going to go through. So I fully expect to see Rowby climb the rankings and not have a problem keeping his tour card after these 2 years. And I expect to see him, really challenging the top 32. If he could keep his form that he had most of last year going into all the major tournaments and TV. The experience should help him now. He's such a brilliant natural talent. I think he's got a huge year coming up, and I fully expect him to start pushing on after that.
Of course, and we talked about you during the World Cup and Mensur, but let's talk about it from Rowby's perspective just quickly. Obviously, his first televised final. How much did he take away from that weekend? I mean, also we can throw in how it got him into the Grand Slam and set him up for the second half of the year.
Yeah, he took loads from it. I mean, obviously, experience helps a lot. In these huge finals, and they were both relaxed going into the final. But I think there was a few points within the final where probably Rowby's experience let him down a little bit. But it's for a guy that's been on the circuit a number of years. There's players throughout the world that have never been in the position that Rowby's been in. So I think this experience will help him hugely. He's been on TV quite a lot over the last year, so it all helps him going forward. And I truly believe that we've got a small superstar just waiting to burst onto the scene. And people have been waiting for it, like I said earlier about his ability. His ability is not questioned. I do believe players need a little bit of experience, or certain players need a little bit of experience, TV exposure, and then manage to push on a bit better. And I think Rowby's going to do that. He's certainly a different person and player than he was a couple of years ago. I mean, he takes darts very seriously now, very settled family-wise. So yeah, I mean, I think it was a huge opportunity for him, and now the experience is just going to help him even more.
One more question on Rowby, a couple more questions overall. We have to talk through that final day of Q School. Went out fairly early and had to sit through a nerve-wracking day. He said in an interview that he went to sleep because he couldn't watch. Can you talk us through that final day as what you and him had to go through, and then that feeling when he got the last tour card?
Yeah, it was just wow. It was kind of heaven and hell within one day. Going into the game against Jerry Hendricks, we knew if he won that game. Well, I knew. I'm not sure Rowby knew, but we knew if he won that game, probably he had his tour card. He started the day quite well. I think the first game was about a 98 average. Second game was 104. He played really well the first two games. So I was just sitting hoping, thinking, watching the first game, just please play well in this game. You got your tour card, then we can relax. Obviously, it didn't happen. Jimmy won the game, and then the nerves sort of started to sink in. We looked at the ranking. We thought it was going to be tight. We needed a lot of results from other people, so we went for something to eat. Rowby could eat. I couldn't. I was just far too nervous. Pacing up and down, checking Dart Connect every 5 minutes to see what was going on. And I think Rowby got a little bit annoyed with me doing that, and just decided, well, there's not a lot we can do. I'm going to go to sleep. So off he went to bed, and I went back downstairs to watch both semi-finals. Luckily, one started a few minutes before the other, so I could actually keep an eye on both. And just watching those missed starts from Dragotine and Horvath, it was awful to see a player go through that. But obviously for Rowby, it was fantastic. And I'm not as sprightly as I used to be. I'm touching 50 now, but I think I touched about 10 seconds getting up about 4 flights of stairs to wake him up and tell him he got his tour card. It was probably the most awful experience in darts, but then one of the nicest experiences in darts. But Rowby's been unlucky over the last few years as far as tour cards, and missing out on keeping his tour card by just a couple of £100, and then the World Championships. If he'd have beat Luke Humphreys, he'd probably had his tour card. And then we were waiting on other results in the World Championships, which would have probably helped him, but they didn't. So, he's been relatively unlucky over the last few years as far as his tour card's been concerned. You make your own luck in this game. Everybody knows that. But it's fine margins, and he's lived by these fine margins for the last few years. Going into Q School, I was fully expecting to get it, win a tour card outright over the first few days. It didn't happen. Pressure started mounting for him, and obviously for me, but I'm trying not to show it. So yeah, I mean, in the end, the last day was heaven and hell in just a few hours. I mean, I couldn't sit down for 3 hours, to be fair, and he went to sleep. Probably the best thing he did. But watching those last starts go in from Martinez was ecstasy as far as I was concerned. But obviously, Rowby missed it all. But he probably did the best thing, to be fair.
Yes, indeed. Quick question on another one of your players, Harold Leidinger. Won a tour card 2020 Q School. Obviously, we didn't get to see as much of him as we might have liked because of the pandemic, but amazing achievement to win a tour card in his first steel tip tournament. Didn't manage to retain it at Q School this year, last weekend even. But what's the plan for him this year?
Again, I think the pandemic hasn't been helpful to the guys that won the tour card 2 years ago. I mean, you expect to be playing week in, week out. Harry's kind of new to steel dart. He's always played soft tip. So it wasn't the best experience for Harry. If it had been playing Pro Tour week in, week out, I'm sure we'd have seen more from Harry. It didn't happen. Unfortunately, that's a set of circumstances that he's been dealt. He has to get on with it. Q School wasn't good to him either. So I've said to him maybe a few years working on WDF and then have a go at getting back go back to Q School again. I think that's probably the route that Harry's going to take. A few WDF tournaments, get a little bit of confidence back, feel good about darts again, and then we'll see what happens maybe towards the end of the year, where to go with Harry.
And then lastly, and most importantly, we saw on Twitter recently that you received a happy birthday message from Rangers FC, who currently sit top of the Scottish Premiership. Do you think, though, that they'll be able to retain the title this year?
Oh, absolutely. Rangers are a huge part of my life, and they have been for many years. And, everybody knows the story of us going down to the bottom division, have to work our way back up again. Last year I've been lucky enough to be alive long enough to see Rangers win many titles, but last year was the sweetest title of my life. 55. Just because it was the first title after the trouble that we've had, and also stopping Celtic 10 in a row was also a good thing. But yeah, I mean, I fully expect Gio's done well since he's come in after Steven Gerrard. Celtic are doing well as well at the moment, but I fully expect 56 to come. Yeah.
Well, good luck on getting that 56 title, and best of luck to you and your players this season.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again to Mick for joining us. Now a look ahead to the new PDC season, for the main tour at least, gets underway this weekend. What storylines have got your attention going into the new season?
Well, and we'll get to one of these storylines in the next question, but I'll mention it just quickly here. Obviously, with the new Premier League format, that in and of itself is going to be a storyline, and how that impacts how those 8 players play for the first half of the year. It could turn out to be even more than normal, a big drain on a player, because it's 16 weeks. And if you're struggling like Glenn Durrant was last year, like some other players have, that's a longer period of time to really deal with the heat of losing, in essence, a knockout match early on almost each week. But it also gives you a new chance to try to get a title the following week. So how the Premier League impacts those 8 players, I think, is a really interesting storyline. Even more so than the new format in and of itself. Other storylines that have got my attention, obviously, and we talked about this a little last week, how the new tour card holders do. I think that's always one of the leading storylines. We won't get that at the very first weekend because none of them are in the Masters. But as the season goes along, we saw last year very early on, Raymond van Barneveld win a title in his, I think, third event back on tour. We saw Alan Suter make some deep runs. We saw some other tour card holders as the year progressed. But with a really diverse group of tour card holders this year, I'm looking forward to just seeing who hits the ground running. And I'll add on one more storyline that I'm looking forward to, and that's the players who last year had their breakthrough. How do they kick on this year? Obviously, Callan Ritz winning a pair of titles. His Northeast friend, in fact, street neighbor, Chris Dobie, also in a way breakthrough with 2 titles last year. How do they kick on this year? How does Ross Smith kick on after what was also a breakthrough year from him, winning a title, qualifying for pretty much all the majors that in his fairly long career now he hadn't done? And a few other players, obviously Ryan Searle getting all the way to the top 16. Does he keep that progression going? So I'll have those 3 storylines. How the I was about to say Q School, how the Premier League players handle outside the Premier League that new format and how it affects them, how those new tour card holders hit the ground running, and how those people who had those breakthroughs last year kick on this year. Those are the 3 storylines I'm most looking forward to.
Definitely agree with those, and it's going to be an exciting year, hopefully. And you touched on there with the Premier League going back to its original format, with it being every Thursday, and then the Pro Tours following at the weekends. That was something that I was going to touch on, is that we're going to hopefully, touch wood, go back to that full calendar like we did pre-COVID, where we had the Premier League Thursdays and then Euro Tours or Players Championships following that, a stacked calendar. And with the 13 Euro Tours and 30 odd Players Championship events this year, hopefully we are going to see that. And just seeing that return to the schedule that we had before COVID is something that I'm really looking forward to seeing, because we've seen over the last couple of years, yes, the PDC have done a great job in keeping darts going, keeping that main tour going with the summer series, the blocks of Players Championship events, the odd Euro Tour event here and there, and of course keeping up with the TV events. But we love seeing the events week in, week out, and it's kind of like a year-long drama, isn't it, where we see players get into form, drop out of form, but it is how they get on over those 12 months and how they peak for those big TV events. And you kind of feel bad for the players that did get their tour cards in 2020, because they didn't really get to fully experience life as a professional, as a tour card holder. But that is what the players that did get their tour cards in the last couple of weeks at Q School are going to get to experience. So looking forward to following that and not having the 4 to 6 week break that we had for quite a bit of it last year between the Pro Tour events. So that's going to be something good to follow. The main one for me, though, and it's got to be the battle for the number 1 spot. We've spoken about it a few times on the show, but it is really exciting this year. For so long, we had Michael van Gerwen miles clear of the rest of the field for a good 7 years, but we saw it took a Player of the Year season for Gerwyn Price to overhaul him for that number 1 spot 12 months ago. And now we fast forward to 2022 and the year that Peter Wright had, and there's barely anything between them, isn't there? It's around £15,000, and you look ahead to what these 2 players have got to defend up until the World Championship. Gerwyn Price, £305,000, a little bit more, and Peter Wright about 265, 270,000. So there's really nothing in it until the World Championship. So I can really see that number 1 spot changing hands maybe 2, 3, 4 times this year, and that's something that you've got to go back a little while before we saw more than one change to the top spot in the PDC, and that was 2008. We saw it change a couple of times. Since then, it's changed twice in the 13 years since then. So hopefully we're going to see a really interesting battle for that number 1 spot over these next 12 months. And Gerwyn Price, he's had it for 12 months. He's still just about got hold of it. Peter Wright, we spoke to him. He's pretty confident he's going to get that number 1 spot at some point in February, but it is the battle for the next 10 months to see who's going to be that number 1 going into Ali Pali and who will finish the season number 1.
Those are definitely interesting storylines. And you made a good point there, something I meant to say as well, the return to a normal calendar, how those players in their second year with a tour card handle what would be a more normal year, how that affects them. Does Alan Suter do as well? I'm curious for that as well. Now, obviously at this point, we usually know the Premier League lineup, but as Barry Hearn tweeted, it won't be announced until after the Masters this upcoming week. Who are your 8 as things currently stand?
Well, I said after the World Championship, if it stays as the 10-player format, then I think it picks itself. I think it would be the top 10 in the world. And unless there's any dramatic changes in the number of players, that's what I thought it would be. But we've seen it drop down to 8 players. And for me, I'm probably looking at Gerwyn Price, Peter Wright, Michael van Gerwen, James Wade, the top 4. And then after that, I'm going with Michael Smith, Johnny Clayton, Rob Cross and Gary Anderson. And it was a tough one, really. I know we look at the graphics and try and pick out the players, and the PDC have put out Gerwyn Price, Peter Wright, Michael van Gerwen, Johnny Clayton on all of them. So that kind of tells you that those 4 are definitely going to be involved. And then it's just a case of who the other 4 players are going to be. And I think it is between 4 of the remaining 6 players in that top 10. So you've also got Dimitri van den Berg, Jose de Souza, who in my list I think just miss out at the moment. But it would be a little bit unfortunate for them because Dimitri did have such a good debut season in the Premier League. He also made 2 finals on TV, and Jose as well. What was the first season he had in the Premier League, making the final. So I think the switch from 10 players to 8 might just see them 2 miss out. But we've got the Masters to come this weekend, and we all know what can happen if someone has a good run in the Masters. Johnny Clayton last year wins it, gets in the field. So the fact that the PDC haven't said who's in the Premier League yet, I think that does tell me that there are spots available, whether that's one spot if someone goes on and wins the title, or if we see 2 players maybe make the final that we didn't really fancy getting in it. Maybe that's what we're going to see. We're going to see 2 players make the final and just pick those other players to the spots. But I think at this moment in time, I'm going with 8 of the top 10, and that is Price, Wright, Van Gerwen, Wade, Smith, Anderson, Clayton and Cross. But it's all to play for at the Masters. If one of those players that I haven't mentioned goes on and lifts the title, it's very hard to see them missing out, and then it would be one of those players missing out.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with you on who I have as well. And as well that there is that possibility that someone could make a deep run at the Masters and steal one of those spots away. Historically the top 4 have been guaranteed, but that criteria doesn't necessarily apply now that things have changed. And I'll put Wade outside of the guaranteed, and I'll go with the same 4 that are on the posters right now. Gerwyn Price, Peter Wright, Michael van Gerwen, and defending champion Johnny Clayton. That's for sure in. And that leaves 4 spots that could go any which way. James Wade won the UK Open, but that was very early last year, and he did get, in essence, a pre-invite to the Premier League because he wasn't initially selected, but he got in when Gerwyn Price got out. So that could be a reason for the PDC not to put him back in this year. He didn't necessarily light up the world after the UK Open last year. And if we take that UK Open as what got him in last year as the replacement player, then is he guaranteed a spot this year? I don't know, but he's still number 4 in the world. He's still not, he's closer to number 3 Michael van Gerwen than he is to number 7 Jose de Souza. So in that respect, he's closer, he is closer to the players who are guaranteed in than to the players who are on the bubble and might not be in terms of ranking. But I think he's right now in the field. I think Rob Cross, as the reigning European champion and also a player who really came back to his game last year, I think he's in as well. It was a good year for him. It's weird seeing him down at number 10, but he's not defending any money this year, and he's a major champion again. I think Rob Cross keeps his spot. And that leaves then 2 spots. Michael Smith as the world finalist, I think is currently in. Gary Anderson's Gary Anderson, but at the same time doesn't like to travel. And with a couple nights in Europe, maybe the PDC decide to leave him out and bring in a second player from Europe, because if not, then it's just Michael van Gerwen from the mainland. So I think Gary Anderson, even though I said he's definitely in not that long ago, now that it's 8, I'm less sure, because Dimitri van den Berg would really be hard done to be left out after the year he had. And maybe it's between Gary Anderson and Dimitri van den Berg heading into the Masters. And whichever of them goes further is going to be that last spot, unless, again, someone else comes and wins the title.
And now move on to our next guest, the player that won both of the titles on the opening day of this year's Challenge Tour. Here's our chat with Scott Williams. I'm pleased to say I'm joined by the recent back-to-back Challenge Tour title winner, Scott Williams. Thanks for the time, Scott. How are you doing?
I'm absolutely fantastic, thank you. How are you?
Doing good, thank you. And only one place to start, and that is with last Friday in Milton Keynes. 17 games played, 17 wins, your first 2 PDC titles. A few days on from it, how do you look back now on that incredible day?
Tiring. I'm still tired. I've slept like a baby the last couple of days. It was hard work. But it happened. It happened. And and I will grab whatever comes from this with 2 hands. I look forward to the next couple of months. I've already had a phone call for the ProTour next week, so that's a positive start. That's for sure.
Well, we're going to come back to the Challenge Tour, but let's circle back to the start for you in darts. How old were you when you discovered darts? How did you get into it?
So darts was just something that my parents used to do, like most people still do now. And I never really played it up until about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Just playing local league, and just got a natural knack for it. A couple of friends got me in touch with a few people, started playing Super League, county, and then it was my first season at county when I qualified for the 2020 BDO World Championship. So I went from 0 to 100 in darts pretty quickly.
Definitely, yeah, quite a late start. And we saw as well, not only darts, you like your football as well. You've been a goalkeeper. Was that just friends at a local level, or how far did you get in that? I've
used to playing semi-professionally, but over the last few years, as I've got older, and darts has become more pinnacle, especially with the money in darts as well. You can go to a lot of competition and pick up £200 or £300 easily. So that always used to take priority over a Saturday afternoon at football. So, but the last couple of years it's just dwindled down, and I've played a little bit here and a little bit there. But I never thought I'd be happy to see back of football.
Well, as you mentioned, you got through those qualifiers at the end of 2019 to get into the BDO World Championship the following year. What was that moment like when you won that last match to confirm that World Championship debut?
It was kind of weird. It was really weird. I had a couple of friends there. One at the time watching as well, and I remember it was Andrew Cayley. I beat him in the last game. I was expecting to play again, and then I went to control to say, I've just won, and they said, see you in January. And at that point, I couldn't believe it. I got a lift with Craig Venman that day as well, who ended up losing Justin Hood in the final game. So I was kind of gutted for him as well, because he got so far. But at the same time, I was absolutely buzzing.
Definitely, and those qualifiers were around late October time, so a good 2 months or so before the O2. What was the build-up like for you heading into that World Championship and playing in the biggest event of your career so far?
It was difficult because I had to go through county qualifiers as well as regional qualifiers as well as the national qualifiers. So it was actually in the end it was over about a 6 or 8 period to actually get to that point. I think I won 20. It was out about 23 or 24 games to qualify for the O2. But the time between October and beginning of January when I was on, it was obviously it's just been a weekend. It's been fantastic. So much support, so many nice people, and people you didn't even realise that either watched or supported you. You come out and send the support messages, and it's absolutely fantastic. And I appreciate everybody.
Well, let's look back at the O2. I know you lost out on your debut to Justin Thompson, but coming away from it, how did you reflect on that first taste of the big time?
It was. I mean, honestly, I would have preferred to play at Lakeside personally, just because Lakeside is iconic. But I can't say anything bad about the O2. The venue was fantastic. The playing area was excellent. The players' room, awesome room with all the people and stuff like that. Yeah, I had a good chat with Justin after we played for a while, because obviously if you've seen Justin, or if anyone's listening and seen Justin, he's not the fastest of players. And back then I was very I was much of a rhythm player, and I needed to be in a rhythm and keep going, and that's when I showed how good I could be. But I've learned quite a lot from that, and then I took that into Q School and did okay at Q School the following year, and the Challenge Tour the following week. So I had a good month, so I couldn't complain about that. But I've become such a better player since that experience on the stage.
Well, it was gearing up to be a busy 2020 for you. You mentioned you went into Q School after that. You were on the Challenge Tour. You got to the semi-finals of the Isle of Man, and then, of course, the world shut down with the pandemic. Before then, did you feel like 2020 was going to be a big year for darts for you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I hoped it would be. I was looking forward to the year. I pretty much got it all planned out of where I was going, what I was doing, and stuff like that. But yeah, the world is what the world is, and I had a lot of success on the online scene throughout 2020 with competitions nearly every night put on by some fantastic people, some great payouts and this and sort of. So I can't complain about 2020 in darts. In all fairness,
and we have to touch on last year getting the call up to play in the third Super Series in Germany. At the time, we were seeing tour card holders pull out due to the restrictions. Were you expecting to get that call, and when you did, were you on board straight away?
It was very last minute. So people were flying in on the Friday in April. I had the phone call on the Wednesday, and you needed a 48-hour PCR test. So I got the phone call from PDC, so I then sent my phone calls out to see if I was able to go, and I was pretty much told if I could get myself the PCR test done that day, then I could go. So me and my wife were on the computer searching, find somewhere local, and we found somewhere, so you got out and got it, and I enjoyed every second of it being there. To be fair, the first proper taste of the PDC, fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, what was that week like in Germany? You played fairly well, high 80s, low 90s averages across all your games. You picked up a win. You lost a couple of deciders as well. What was that experience like of the Pro Tour for the first time?
Yeah, it was absolutely fantastic. It was, even in the circumstances, because we were quite lucky. It was bubbled, but the venue was open, so we still had the bar and food and everything like that. So it was just surreal for me at the time, just walking around and seeing the players and going to breakfast with all the players and seeing people that I only see on TV. I'm sat next to, or eating breakfast with. And yeah, the games were frustrating. But again, I've got loads of experience from that playing Mensur. I missed darts, 6 darts in one day, get a double. I should have been 3-0 up. Ended up being 3-2 down in the end. And it's stuff like that where you just makes you grow as a player, makes your head stronger, and that's pretty much what this game's about. It's all head games.
Well, you mentioned some of the players that you've seen on TV. You got the nod to play in 2 other Players' Championships later that year. One in June, you go up against Peter Wright. Then the last one of the year in November, you played James Wade in the second round. What was it like going up against 2 of the world's top 4?
It was okay. I mean, as they were both last days, and they were just obviously people dropped out, and I had the late phone call. I hadn't prepared and I wasn't ready. So against Peter, he ended up winning the day. He beat me, and then ended up beating my buddy Rob in the quarterfinals, I think it was. And he beat me with an 86, 87 average. It could have been 89, something like that. But it was a poor game from us, and then he carried on and won the day, so fair play to him. And then the last one of the year, I beat Charles Barstow 6-5, and then James Wade. And you know what you're going to get with James. It's very simple. It's going to be a ton, and out, and it's gone. And that's pretty much what he did, and it was steady after him. So there's nothing I could do. And to be fair, that's what it is.
Well, that brings us on to this year, and you once again made it through to the final stage of the UK Q School. Just missed out on that tour card. But how are you feeling heading into the Challenge Tour the following weekend?
I felt a lot of pressure on myself for Q School, especially when with the first stage I waited till the last day to fancy it again. A couple of hundred just averages to give me the points in making it through, and then the second stage was always going to be tough. Some of the top players have dropped out of the tour cards, and then you got some of the best players from last year that are already automatically in, and then all the best players that have pulled in from the first stage that are automatically through. So it was always going to be hard. Every game was going to be hard, and I'll be honest, I didn't feel fantastic, and I was pleased to get a couple of points. But coming in the Challenge Tour was completely different. So relaxed. Didn't feel any pressure. It was my wedding anniversary anniversary the night before Q school, so I didn't. So I actually travelled down at 6 o'clock in the morning on Friday, and I joked with my wife over dinner that day, the evening before, that I said to her, I'll just joke. I said, what I'll do is I'll just win both on Friday and not have to worry about the rest of the weekend, and then I'll be in the Pro Tour for the first half of the year. And here we are.
Yeah, what a first day it was on the Challenge Tour this year, and we could be a while talking through the two events, but from your perspective, what were you most pleased with from your game which took you to those two titles?
How calm I was with every single game. A lot of the games you can look back at them and I think I went maybe 1 or 2-0 down, or I was 2-1 down at the stages early on, and then I brought it back and I'd win 3 or 4 on the trot, and then I finished the game off. And a lot of Tumpus checkouts, and they helped me throughout the day. And just doubles in general were for once my friends. That's the difference I had on the Friday compared to the Saturday and the Sunday. Saturday and Sunday, I couldn't hit a double 7.5, and look where we are. But I've still got to take plenty of positives from the weekend. Even the Saturday and the Sunday, there's still plenty of positives to take from winning a couple of games out of 2 days.
Yeah, we should touch on the rest of the weekend. And I had down here at one point you were going for the Arsenal 49 games unbeaten. Maybe you were looking at the 23, 24 games unbeaten that you did to get the World Championship qualifiers first. But your run stops short at 18 early on that next day.
Yeah.
How tough was it to go into that Saturday off the back of that massive high of winning both the titles?
Yeah, it would. Again, I'll be honest with you, I wasn't overly bothered. I was pleased. And, I've got plenty of friends on the tour, so whoever hadn't messaged me in the evening, I've seen another 100 of them as I've walked into the venue, and everyone's been fantastic and congratulating me and whatever. I felt okay. I didn't sleep very well, mainly because I was, the adrenaline had taken over at 2 o'clock. By the time I fell asleep in the morning after replying to most people, phone calls. And then I'm up again at 6:30 to get myself ready to get into the venue for 8 o'clock and to start it all again. So my body personally wasn't ready to carry it on. I was pleased to get the first win, and then and I touched up on the doubles, not being my friend. It was the doubles that let me down against Jason Hogg. I was like 4-3 up against Jason. Missed 3 darts to win 5-3. I missed, he took it out, and then I missed 3 darts again to win 5-4. I missed, he took it out, and that's when I kind of knew that my riding luck had been a bit over, but I still kept a big smile on my face, and I waited and tried to keep going for the rest of the day, because they are long days.
Yeah, they definitely are, and we should touch on as well that between those 2 title wins, I think you had about 15 minutes before you were back on playing your next game. I mean, from your perspective, what would you like to see the PDC do with the Challenge Tour to make it better than it is? We've had a lot of comments coming over the weekend, maybe go to one event a day and double the prize fund, or potentially look at maybe seedings for these events. What would you like to see as a player?
Yeah, I think both of them are great ideas. The one I hear more often from people is the first one, where they one event, double the prize money. That's one. I'm not saying I'm with that. I would prefer maybe a bigger venue if they have them with more boards. I think 2 competitions in one day is absolutely fine, because then it gives the people game time. That's what people are there for. They're paying the £50 entry, and they want some game time or the chance to get game time. So I think if there's the possibility of more boards in venues, I think that would be something they could probably look at. But I think it's all about managing yourself during the weekend and knowing what works for you, and trying to keep your body sustained, keep your energy up, as well as your positivity as well. If you can try and do that, which I know a lot of people throughout the tour are struggling to do it, then you can kind of see through it. But you get people like who won PT4, Sue Wilson, GT Sue, fantastic player over the first couple of days, had a couple of okay runs, and then he's managed to do it on the second day all the way through to the second day, and that's for what I did, because everyone's fresh from the night before, the morning before, whatever. Whereas he's gone and lasted two full days and what. So fair play to him, and that's the big thing. So I don't think anything's going to change with it anytime soon, because it's just there's too much, especially this year. There's too much crammed in weekends wise for stuff to be moved out and to be added. But yeah, I'd like to see probably more boards.
Well, you touched on the calendar this year being crammed. It's heading back towards what it was like pre-COVID, and you mentioned you're going to be on the first couple of Players' Championships. You're probably likely going to be in the first 6 Players' Championships of the year, but we know that the 3 after that are going to clash with that second weekend of the Challenge Tour. You might not have looked that far ahead yet, or have you already made up your mind which one you'll go to?
I've already looked ahead, and I'm already looking to July. I'm still thinking I'm going to be probably on the Pro Tour in July. Hopefully if someone drops out, if people drop out. But, yeah, it's a busy calendar. You got this month. You got Pro Tour for myself. I'm at Modus as well this month. Challenge Tour in a couple of months. That clashes with Pro Tour. So the whole next 6, especially for me personally, the whole 3-4 months is going to be busy. But I can't complain. It's where I want to be. It's what I want to be doing. If I didn't want to do it, I wouldn't have gone to Q-School.
And lastly, we should finish up by mentioning your nickname, Shaggy. Are you a fan of the great man? What's your favourite Shaggy song?
Favourite Shaggy song was It Wasn't Me.
Oh, yes.
And I've used that many times, but I'm not a big fan of the nickname Shaggy, I'll be honest with you. It's just a work nickname that somehow was crept around, and friends throughout football and darts know me as that, so it's just kind of kept.
Well, Scott, it was you that won those first 2 titles of the Challenge Tour this year. Congratulations on that success, and we wish you all the best for the Pro Tour next week and what else is to come for the rest of 2022.
Thank you very much. Thanks for your time.
Thanks again to Scott for joining us. Now on to the Masters. The traditional curtain raiser for the PDC season starts this Friday. The extended field of 24 players continues, but who is this event most important for?
I like how you call it the traditional curtain raiser, and I feel like I've now been a darts fan long enough that I can say I remember back when this wasn't the curtain raiser. I can remember back when this was at the end of the year. I can remember when the World Cup was the curtain raiser, and the Huybrechts brothers were leading Belgium to the final on what was Super Bowl Sunday in the U.S. But yeah, for a long time now, this has been the first event after Q School. And while last year it had the expanded field to 24, it's still been that event where the top of the top in the rankings get a tournament on television, on ITV, to kickstart their season and to get things going. As far as who it's most important for, it's important, obviously, if the Premier League really is still up for grabs and there is a spot, then it's important for everyone who's not in the field. But even taking that aside, it's, I think, a weird event where it might be more important for some of the seeded players than it is for the unseeded player, or I guess they're all seeded, but the seeded top 8 that have the bye. Because, look, Johnny Clayton, what a year he had last year. But this is now going to be the first time, World Cup aside, where he is the defending champion at a televised major. And how does he handle that? And how does this affect the start of his season, which he might not be in the rankings defending a lot of prize money, but he's defending his status as one of the top 4 players in the world, one of those players who's the face of the Premier League. A good start to the season is critical for that. If he goes out early, maybe some doubts might start to creep in ahead of the Premier League. It's big for him because I think he needs a hot start to show he is still one of those top 4. Michael Smith, also one of the seeded players who you'll hear from in a second. This is that opportunity for him to kick on from what was an amazing couple of weeks at Ali Pali and maybe to get that first major title of his career. He nearly did it a couple of years ago before missing match start and losing to Peter Wright in the final when Peter Wright was the defending world champion like he is now. Michael Smith, though, this is a big opportunity for him to get that first title, especially since his first match will be against 2 players who are very good competitors, but we're struggling a bit at the back end of the year. Good chance for him to get some momentum right off the bat. But then obviously also for the players at the bottom of the draw, of those seeded players in the bye, Jose de Sousa really struggled at the back end of last year. Michael Van Guren, only the 1 televised title, only the 2 titles overall last year. And Gary Anderson, no titles last year. All of them have a lot to prove. And this is a big opportunity since they are on what seems like the easier side of the draw, all things considered. but they need that deep run and really stamp a start to their season. Of the non-seeded players, I think it's biggest. I'll just go through one to leave you some people to say, but I think it's biggest for Joe Cullen because it's been so long now that we think he is so close, and he has a very favorable draw. Yeah, Daryl Gurney is back on the up, but Gary Anderson waits in the second round, and then question marks await in the quarterfinals between potentially Michael Van Gerwen, but also Nathan Aspinall, he just pulled out due to injury, Devin Peterson, who's been struggling, and Luke Humphreys, who would be a winnable match for Joe. This is a big opportunity for Joe Cullen with this draw to finally get that breakthrough that has been coming for so long. Like a few other players, like Michael Smith, once that breakthrough does come, whether it's to make a final in his case or to win a title, Michael Smith, you think they'll keep coming because he is a very, very good player. And he has the rhythm that he can just latch into and throw at a high standard for hours on end. It'll have to come at some point. Maybe this will be that tournament for him. That's why it's a big opportunity.
Yeah, and I said it in the last question that we spoke about with the Premier League lineup not being announced yet. It does add to the magnitude of the Masters. So this tournament is important, you could say, for virtually the whole field, barring, if for that reason, the big three, are we calling them the big four with Johnny Clayton? We can't put Michael Smith in there because I know that the big five's already been taken by another management group in darts already. But I think barring those big three and Johnny Clayton, the big four, the Premier League spots are up for grabs. And we said it, because the lineup's not been announced yet. That's rather telling, isn't it? That the PDC, they might have their 8 players in pencil at the moment, but they've got the eraser ready to rub out some players and put some other players in, depending on how this weekend goes. So I think it'll be difficult for a lot of these players to go into this weekend. Of course, they want to win the title. They want to become a Masters champion, but they'll have one eye on the Premier League and thinking, if I can have a deep run here this weekend, get to a final, win the title, that could be me in the Premier League. And it's not the Premier League of last year when it started behind closed doors and with the blocks of matches, the 4 or 5 nights with no fans in the building. This is going back to a Premier League like we knew it before, where you're playing week in, week out in front of big arenas across the UK, across Europe. It's something that every player wants to be involved in. So I think for that reason, it's going to be important for a lot of players, because the carrot at the end of it, winning this title, should put them in the Premier League. But if I'm looking at players in the big four, I know you mentioned Johnny Clayton there. I'll go with 2 others, and I'll start off with Gerwyn Price. I touched on it earlier about the world number 1 spot being up for grabs this year. This is a title that he's yet to win. The best he's had is a semi-final last year. What better way to stamp his authority on the rest of the field and say, okay, my number 1 spot might be going in the next few weeks, but put the rankings to one side. I'm the best player, and to do that, what better way than to win the Masters, the first event of the year? And the other player that made a habit of winning this Masters is Michael Van Gerwen. He won it for 5 years in a row. We started the year, it was essentially go to Milton Keynes, pick up 60 grand as you pass going to the start of the season. That's what Michael Van Gerwen did, but he's not won it for the last couple of years. As you say, his return last year is something that we've not seen from him for a very, very long time, since he become the world number 1 and started winning all these titles. For him to only win 1 World Series event on TV last year, he knows that he's a lot better than that, and he'll want to do a lot better than that. So for him to start the year with a Masters title, with all the best players in the world, the top 24, now we've got the top 26 with a couple missing, a couple of players pulling out, but you've still got pretty much all the top players in the world there. So if he can go all the way, pick up the title, could be a huge start to the season, and maybe the return of MVG.
I love the Monopoly reference. Go directly to Barnsley. Do not pass Milton Keynes. Do not collect 60,000 pounds. But let's one more question on the Masters. Obviously, the draw is done in ranking order, although due to 2 withdrawals, number 25 and number 26 have filled in as well. Any first-round ties and potential second-round ties, though, that you're most looking forward to?
There definitely is. And, yeah, we've seen the world number 18 and the world number 14 pull out. Don't ask us what will happen if one of the top 8 seeds pull out, because we have got some silly ideas with that. But looking at the lineup that we've got, there are some exciting games there. I've jotted down a few from the first round that I'm looking forward to, and one right at the top of the bracket, and it on paper should be the closest game. You've got the world number 16 Ryan Searle, one of the debutants this year, against the world number 17 Mervyn King, and the winner of that to play Gerwyn Price in the second round. Ryan Searle, it's been a great 2021 for him. What's he missing? Well, can he have a major title this year? He's got to a final, but can he have a big win against one of the big boys on TV? He's come close to beating the likes of Gary Anderson and Peter Wright. A win over Going Price would be a huge start to the year, but he's got to get past Mervyn King, who got to the final last year. He's always capable of pulling off a big run on TV, as we've seen over the last few years. Never write him off. So that's one that I'm really looking forward to. Away from that, though, I was going to mention Nathan Aspinall, Luke Humphries. That game, of course, has been cancelled. It's now Devon Peterson against Luke Humphries. So the other game that I'll mention from the first round, and that is Dirk van Dijvenbode against Simon Whitlock, the other alternate in the field. Whitlock taking Danny Noppert's place. That's a really intriguing game for me, because you go back to the World Grand Prix, I think it was the semi-finals 2020. Simon Whitlock was an alternate in that event. He was probably the favourite to get to the final, given that he'd beaten Michael van Gerwen the night before, and didn't manage to get the job done. Dirk beat him and got to the final, but I think we all remember that game for some slightly questionable tactics from Simon Whitlock in that game. So I don't know if they've played too many times since then. I can't remember if they've played on TV since then, but this one is one that I'm really looking forward to. We all know that when Simon Whitlock gets into a field as an alternate, he's a very dangerous player. So he's going in with a free run here. So that's one I'm really looking forward to. And just lastly, on the potential second round ties, I mentioned the one that Going Price could have. What about the one that Johnny Clayton could have? Could play Dimitri van der Berg. That could be a really exciting second round game. And then you've potentially got the Battle of England last year, Dave Chisnell and James Wade, Team England for the World Cup. That's one that I'm looking forward to. And the last one, it's looking likely now, is Luke Humphries, Michael van Gerwen. And they had a cracker at the UK Open last year. Luke, that was a huge win for him. And the way he played, Michael won his revenge in a similar length format. So that's one I'm looking forward to if it happens.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting ties. And, I mentioned on the last question, Ratajski, Clemens, both really struggling. Clemens did not kick on last year. Ratajski had a great first half of the year, but struggled a bit in the second half and wasn't playing anywhere near his best on television at the World Championships in the last couple of events. But maybe the reset will be good for both of them. And after a year where neither of them really kicked on, this is a match that I'm just curious to see how they play, because both of them are very good. Ratajski, of course, 8 titles over the last 4 seasons. Clemens still hasn't won a PDC title. I think he's now the highest ranked player who hasn't. Oh, sorry, Luke Humphries is highest. He's the second highest ranked player who's yet to win a title. But both of them, well, they aren't living up to their rankings right now, but it's a match that therefore is equally interesting. Dave Chisnell, Stephen Bunting. Chizzy didn't really do much last year after that great World Championship performance. Obviously, the match against Michael van Gerwen, but that entire World Championship up until the semifinals was great from Chizzy, but didn't kick on. Bunting, it was a renaissance from him, but we know the player that Chizzy is. This is a match that even best out of 11 legs could see north of 11 180s in 11 legs, especially with how well Bunting has been playing in the last year or so now. As far as potential second round ties, being that a lot of these are tough first round ties to pick, it makes it even tougher to single out a second round tie, because whoever I say it might be against, it's probably going to end up being the other person with a bad PR tipping. But I'm really looking forward to Gezi against either Ryan Searle or Mervyn King. Mervyn is always interesting to watch, and that's also why that could be a very interesting first round tie. But Ryan Searle has become a star in the making, and that is not the player that Gezi would want to play first match back from the post-Worlds break. Whoever gets to do that will have every chance to get the win, and if it's Ryan Searle, wouldn't be that far off from being the favorite. And one other potential second round tie, I don't want to say all the ones you said, but I am really looking forward to that potential Michael van Gerwen against Luke Humphries. Obviously, Devon Peterson, if he bounces back to the form we saw from him 18 months ago, can absolutely beat Luke Humphries. But what we saw from him last year and what he just didn't deliver for the entire year makes you think he's not going to challenge Luke Humphries. But if he does, and if he is able to get back, that would be a great first round tie. But a second round between Luke Humphries and Michael van Gerwen is very interesting, because Humphries should be coming in with a bit more confidence. And MVG has a lot of question marks hanging over his head. But if he can return to the form that let him lift this that is a tongue twister, that led to lifting this title 5 years in a row. I think he has a couple gears that Luke Humphries doesn't quite have yet, but he'll need to get to that form because Luke Humphries has plenty of gears, and he only needs to find some of those to run the world number 3 tight.
And I forgot to add as well, Johnny Clayton won the Masters last year, the first player outside the top 16 to do so. He was the 18th seed. This year, the 18th seed is not in the field. Simon Whitlock comes in. Will he become the first player outside the top 24 to win the Masters? All that to be found out this weekend. And we're going to hear now from a player that is going to be in the Masters this weekend. Here's our chat with the recent World Championship finalist, Michael Smith.
I'm joined by the reigning world finalist, Michael Smith. Michael, how are you?
Not too bad. Yourself?
Doing well, thank you. And it's been now 3 weeks since your run to the final at Ali Pali. A lot of players use the time before the new season to recharge the batteries, and some go on holiday. How have you spent the last 3 weeks?
Finished on the 4th, put me down to wait till the 10th, and then just started back practicing, but just in between fishing and cleaning animals out, making new pens. Yeah. Just normal life away from darts, I guess.
Of course, always good to get some time away from the game. Last year, a lot to catch up on. Before the start of the season, you signed with Darting Promotions. We've had Mark Pritchard on shortly after you signed, and he was excited about what you could bring to his stable of players and obviously your potential. What were the main draws for you in linking up with Mark and the guys at Darting Promotions?
Just himself, really. He's just a genuinely nice person. He's genuine. Like, I know everyone else, like, I got offers off virtually every manager. But when Mark messaged me, he asked me, what will I offer him? So I said, like, I'll give you 5%. And he said, all right, done. When he sent the contract, I was like, I was only joking. I just wanted to see if he was genuine or not. And yeah, we sat down, had a chat, and my direction was forward and so was his. So it just made sense to go with him as well.
Looking back last year, the last Premier League spot, and we'll get back to the Premier League this year, went to Johnny Clayton after he won the Masters, meaning that you narrowly missed out after having been in the field the previous 3 years. Even though it ended up going ahead behind closed doors, did you miss being involved?
I think everyone knew I missed it. I told they kept saying in interviews when I was playing that I should have been in, I should have done this, should have been that. But when I give up that idea of I should have been in, it was already picked anyway. So it was like, just get your head down, focus, and show them what they're missing. And towards the back end of the year, when I finally decided to do that, everything started to go right for me then.
And we'll get to the back end of the year in a bit. Now, we saw you back on the screens, the UK Open and the World Match Play, especially that World Match Play being the first main event that had a crowd again. How good was it to be back at the Winter Gardens playing in front of fans?
It felt good. It felt like you got your right arm back. It was something that we've all been missing. Well, me especially. Like, art is nothing about the fans. It just felt like I was back in my bedroom again, practicing as a kid, like wishing to be on stage in front of fans. So when we was playing in Milton Keynes behind closed doors, it just felt like I was locked up. I was 14 years old again. And then, yeah, we got the fans back, and it was the best thing ever. It's like, people be all moan saying, oh, they put you off when you're going for a shot, they cheer too loud or whatever. But without them, it's nothing. You need the fans there for the show to go on, really.
And of course, in front of that crowd, classic match against Jose de Sousa in round 2, going to overtime. We called it the Heart Hand Jester Derby, and you didn't disappoint with your celebration afterwards. How much confidence did you take from that win, especially how well Jose was playing at the time?
I think Jose had just beat me as well in the UK Open, so I think that one, he did. I think that went to a last leg as well. So it was. I knew he had a 2-leg cushion. Then once I got it level, especially when I think I checked out 108 after he just missed. So yeah, the confidence started to buzz then. And I think I played Peter Wright in the quarters, which wasn't the best preparation because I got stuck in traffic on the way down, and they had like an hour to get prepared. I got there, I think, at 6 o'clock. But no, 5:30, I think. And then by the time I'd done the interviews and stuff, it was 6, and I was first on at 7. So I was nowhere near prepared for it. And then, but that's life. That's my own fault for not staying over in the hotel and keep travelling back and forward from home. So, yeah, lessons learned. But first 2 games, a lot of confidence was took from him.
Well, it seemed like it worked out despite the traffic. Of course, after the match, on your post-match interview on Sky, brought out the Gladiator line, "Are you not entertained?" Are you not entertained? Do you think we'll hear some more movie line references again this year after big wins?
I don't know why I said that, to be fair. It was just because the fans, like, because they come back, and it was just good to have it, and especially a game like that where it was so. It wasn't the best of games, like 110 average each, but it was the entertainment factor and like the pressure situations we were both in. That's why I just said it to you, not entertained, like you got to be back type thing. But the schedule we've got on now, I don't think we've got enough time to watch movies and try to find some quotes and to say no.
Of course, after the match play, you won some Players' Championship events, bringing your total up to 14, one more than your good friend Ian White. Have you mentioned that to him, or how many times have you mentioned that to him?
I mentioned it a few times, but I did mention it to him again on Thursday. Was it Thursday just gone? I said to him, "You need to start pulling your finger out because I'm pulling away from you now, mate." But then he did remind me that it was 3 in front after I went a 3-year spell without winning anything. So, yeah, now I'm going to have to get a few more ahead so he can kickstart his career back as well.
Of course, and those 2 titles got you into the Grand Slam, and it was a memorable week for you, going deep and beating Michael Van Gerwen in the quarterfinals 16-13. Stormed to an early lead, but he fought back, but you managed to get over the line. What did that win mean to you?
Mixed emotions that game, because I was playing well, and I thought I could have won the game a lot sooner. Like, I was so far, I think it was like 15-7 up, I think, or 15-8. So it was kind of, I was playing well. Then I got disappointed to let him even have a sniff again back into the game. Then back to happy and where I handled it at the end and got over the line. But yeah, the Grand Slam, it's always been, not my tournament because I've never won it, but it's my favourite tournament. Like that tournament, I'm virtually, and I think I've topped the group for the last 6 years. I'm virtually in the last 8 nearly every other year. So yeah, I really do like that tournament. I like the format, the pace of it, and playing the best players in the world that year. Anyway, the best players that year, should I say? Because you're in there for one reason. You either made a final or you've won Pro Tours or Europeans. So there's no give me match. You've got to be on 100% straight away. After
that, lost Peter Wright in the semifinals and had a narrow defeat in the Players' Championship finals to Daryl Gurney. How are you feeling, though, about the state of your game heading to Ali Pali?
Again, the Peter Wright game, I thought I could have wrapped that up, but Peter's last 5 or 6 legs was unreal. And even when they were saying he had to do 12s or less to win a leg, I think 3 of them I missed out at double in 3 of the legs, so I could have won. Well, I couldn't say I could have won the match because I never had a shot at it, but yeah, I could have been a lot comfier. And going against Darryl, I don't think I've ever played well in my head, especially in the Players' Champs, because of my hands every time. Because when I broke both hands, when it's cold, my hands are really sore, and we're playing virtually in a tent on the sea front, so it's never the warmest. But yeah, leading up to the Worlds, it doesn't matter how bad you've been playing, how good you've been playing. It's the World Championships that brings its own pressure to it. And I think everyone knows about me. I believe in myself 100%. So confidence for me is never an issue. Doesn't matter if I'm playing bad or playing good. I'm confident no matter what.
Well, there's definitely a lot more good at Ali Pali than bad. It started out first match, performance of the second round, really, 106 average against Ron Muhlenkamp. After the game, though, you said that you'd taken yourself off of most social media. We've seen that as a growing trend with players handing their Twitter accounts over to management. And you said it had a positive impact on your game, but then set up a new Twitter account. Were you wary of doing that?
When I took myself off social media, it was I think it was the start of the year. And yeah, it was. I always wanted to get back on Twitter. It was just I'd been hacked at the same time because I was off it. Never knew I got hacked. So when I tried to reinstate it, it was like, well, now I can't get on it. All my passwords have changed. Everything's gone. And the way I felt, I was not in I think it was the quarterfinals, I think. I was like, I feel good. I feel like I can make the final, and I feel like I can. Like, I've been playing really well so far. If I started Twitter now, I'm not going to get the hate like I was before. But, yeah, it was just one of them stupid nights where I thought, yeah, I'll get back on it. I'm bored. I've got no one to talk to type thing, so I just put it on. But if it starts happening again, it can be easily deleted or, like you just said, handed over to my manager and he can deal with it.
Of course, and let's talk though about those a quarterfinal in the last 16 as well. Last 16 match against Johnny Clayton. Our listeners voted it the match of the year in our annual weekly Dartscast awards, and then the quarterfinal against Gurren Price, equally great match. What's it like to play two matches like that back to back of such a high quality and to win? What's it like playing those matches and then getting through and winning?
There's two sides of that coin. If you play in the matches and lose, it's like there's not really much you can take from it, that you played well but got beat. And then when you say, like, I won and I played really well, it was like the positives are there then, because then the game after, I took the same game in and you see when Price hit the 9, give it the big one, and then that was to make it 1-1 in that set. Then I went out in 11 and 12 to win the set. And it was like, well, I didn't blow everything the game before. I've actually kept my game going and just kept looking forward. So there's the positives from that. And yeah, it was just unreal. But sometimes you just want to play in games where you can just get over the line and not have to keep fighting and fighting and fighting. But for people watching and people who subscribe to channels to see the games, they're the games they want to see. And that, if I was a fan, I'd want to watch that every week, like every game. Like that type of sportsmanship, and the aggression was there when it needed to be. The big finishes, the 180s. It was a perfect advertisement for darts, I think, especially the one against Johnny.
Yep, and then looking ahead, you beat James Wade in the semifinals to set up that final against Peter Wright. Up 5-4-2-0 in the 10th set, and didn't do much wrong, but Peter just 113 average over those last 10 legs. Did you feel like you were closing in on the title, though, before Peter produced that late spurt?
Yeah, I think another thing I learned in that final was when I played Michael, the first final I was in, it was like I kept looking at the trophy going, you're coming over me, and my head just went. And then against Peter, I was just focusing on the match, just win the match. It wasn't about a world title. It wasn't about nothing. It was just a match. And when I was 5-4 up, 2-0 up, I actually looked at the trophy and I was like, get this next leg and go 6-4. You've won, you're world champion. And that was a bit of childish and immaturity, I should say. So now I know the next world final I'm in, because trust me, it's not my last. So the next world final I'm in, yeah, it'd be a different story. I lost my first one 7-3, second one 7-5, so you need 7 sets. So the next one should be 7 to me and whatever to whoever I'm playing in the final.
Obviously, disappointment after the match, and understandably so. But have you been able to reflect on those 2-3 weeks at Ali Pally and as well in the whole season and the strides you made last year?
Yeah, of course. After the final, you see what losing means to me. Like, I'm not someone to shy away from my emotions, how I feel. I wear my heart on my sleeve, and I won't change that for anyone. But the day after, it settles down. You slept on it. You can't change time. You can't go back in time. So these positives, I played 4 amazing matches, or 5. I don't know how many. Yeah, 5 of them. It was just, and I played an amazing final. It was just, yeah, Peter played well towards the end, and I lost track. How do you say that word? Sight of track, or whatever it is, what I should have been doing. But yeah, there's a lot of positives to take from me. I played amazing final, and it capped my year off basically. I've won Pro Tours. I was having deep runs in some of my favourite tournaments that I like, and then come to the World Champs, especially after the last 2 years going out the first round, to make the final, playing as well as I did. My doubles, for some reason, was always going in. And that was the biggest shock for me in the World Champs. Is like, I'm normally a score-heavy person and give myself chances at doubles. But this tournament, I was scoring really heavy, and I was hitting doubles first, second attempts all the time. So the positives are definitely there, and it's definitely helping now for the strong 2022.
And just a couple more questions. All eyes this upcoming weekend on the Masters. You head in as the 5th seed, but I'm sure you'll have one eye on the Premier League announcement as it's yet to be confirmed. You tweeted to the PDC asking that they pick you. If they're listening, can you tell them why you should be back in?
I should be back. Well, I'm one of the best 180 hitters in the world, and that's not blowing smoke up my own whatever, but I think the records are there to see. I've just set in the World Champs. I know Peter had the most in one match, but I equalled it in the final. 83 180s in the whole tournament. If I would have come in the first round, and if Ron Meulenkamp would have gone close, I would have easily set over 100. And you see every tournament I play, what doesn't matter how bad I'm playing, 180s flying. I bring entertainment. I just bring. I don't know. Yeah. I'm just me. I think I should be in it, but PDC need to hurry up and announce it because it's not nice not knowing if you're in or not, especially after the Masters. Because if you play Sunday, if I win my first game, then I'm on Sunday. I won't know I'm in until about 11 at night, and then if I am, I've got to be in Cardiff on the Tuesday, so I don't really have time to prepare, get more suitcases because I'll be on the road so often with like 2 nights for the Premier League. We're travelling Wednesday, playing Thursday, then I need the second suitcase for Pro Tours or Europeans on the weekend. So it'd be nice to know a bit earlier than what we're going to be told, basically.
Of course. And then lastly, Alex and I had a bit of a disagreement on our show a couple weeks ago. He said you'd win a major this year. I said he was wrong and guaranteed that you'd win 2. Which of us is right?
None, because I'm going to win 3. No. Listen, mate, I've lost so many finals, and I've won a lot of Pro Tours Europeans. I'm not going to be greedy. I only want 1. If I get 2, yes. If I get 3, even better. But I'm just concentrating on myself now. It's instead of chasing a dream of winning every single title because you know you're going to be disappointed in the end. Just set the little goals, win the Pro Tour, win a European, go deep into major tournaments. I think I say it all the time. My main aim in a major tournament is to make the last 8, and then once I'm in the last 8, I look forward to getting to the final. Once you're in the final, you look forward to winning. But yeah, obviously I do want to win the majors. I want, like Johnny Clayton done this year, he won 4. That I want to be doing that, but just let me get the first one first. I want to get the first, and I don't even know how many I can win then, because I know I'll start to get more than just 1.
Well, Michael, best of luck in the Masters and best of luck this season.
Thank you very much, mate. Cheers.
Thanks again to Michael for joining us, and we'll finish up the show with some listener questions. These were held over from last week's show, so we promised we'd get them in. The first one comes from Andrew Kinsman, who says, given that the overall final stage averages in EU Q School were some 4 to 5 points below those of the UK, does the split criteria need to be amended for 2023? Under the current criteria, there's a very real chance that there'll be more spots for EU than UK next year.
It's an interesting question. I didn't look as deeply into the data before I saw this question come in as obviously I did afterwards while preparing. It really is a valid point, because if you look through, and I'll start with the players who won the tour card. Yes, Jose Justicia finished was the highest average throughout all of the Q schools and won a tour card. But after him, of the top 18 of the 32 players who won tour cards through Q school, only 4, including Justicia, came through the European. Bendon Bojarde in 7th, and two of my tips, the 2 that won cards, are Ricardo Pietreco in 12th and Rowby-John Rodriguez in 16th. The other 14 were all out of the UK Q school, and that means from the players at the bottom of those tour card winners, almost all of them were the European, including the bottom 3. But even of the players who didn't win their tour cards, if you look through, of the top, I believe it was 19 players who didn't win a tour card at Q School, 16 of them came from UK. Only 3, Wesley Placer, Thibaut Trickle, who we didn't talk about earlier, but actually played pretty well in the Challenge Tour this past weekend, and Jesus Nogueira, who also played pretty well in the Challenge Tour. Those were the only 3 that came from European. And even going down further, you have to go down another 4 or 5 players, actually 6 players, to Fabian Schmutzler, the young German, who was the next highest. So there is something to be said. There is a lot of evidence that shows that, at least on averages, the players who won tour cards from the UK Q School are a few points better than the ones that won it from the EU. But again, that also comes down to there was more depth in the UK Q School, and you can only beat who's in front of you. There's no you don't need to put in the same energy to beat someone who's averaging 65, 70 against you as you would to beat someone who's averaging 75, 80 against you, and same as it goes up. So part of what might be why those averages were lower were because there was that less depth, and therefore there were more matches where those players could coast, which dragged down their overall average. And it's tough to say whether that is the case or not. I don't know what the correct solution is. If there can be some formula that sets it based not on the number of entries, but based on how the new tour card holders each year do on the tour. What is their average result for these 32 players this year? And that could decide how many spots they get. If on average, the UK players are averaging 1.2 wins per Players' Championship event individually, while the European ones are averaging 1, you can then ratio that out and determine how many spots they go. If it's reverse, then great. That might be the best way. How do these players do once they're on the tour, and figure something out that factors that in? But I don't think we can do it entirely based on averages and say that that's not right, because what is important is how they produce once they're on the tour. If they're able to create some formula, and I'll challenge Christopher Kemp to come up with that, or Darts Elo to come up with that. If they can come up with some formula that does based on results on the Pro Tour, I think that would be best, and that would be a better criteria. But if not, I think it should stay with the number of entries, because overall we are seeing the players who make the tour by and large are up for it, and you're going to have a great class of 32, even if on paper at Q School the European players were behind the UK players.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question that Andrew asks. And you mentioned Christopher Kemp. I had him down here on my notes as well, because he put a tweet up after Q School, the percentage of match averages over 90 at Q School. Last year, the UK and EU were very close together. This year, we've seen the EU percentage drop. I think it was around 13% last year, dropped down to 10% this year. And the UK has gone from 14% to around 20%. So it's a tricky one to look at, isn't it? Because when you look at Q School, there are so many different variables. You're not just looking at a 32 player field, 6,428 players. You're looking at 650 odd players, and they are all of varying abilities. You've got players that are going there for a bit of fun, averaging in the 40s and the 50s, playing in the first stage. And then you've got players that get through to the final stage, averaging in the 90s, sometimes in the hundreds as well. So there's a huge gap in the averages for this event, which does hold a lot of importance in darts to get those tour cards. So I think what we've seen in recent years is that the PDC are open to changing things with Q School, trying to make it as good as possible for them to get the best players for those tour cards that become available every year. And is the system that they've got at the moment the perfect solution? You say no, there are ways that they can improve it. Is it better than it was when you had all the players together in one Q School in the UK and there was no first stage, second stage? Yes, I think you'd say it is a lot better now. But I think going forward, it is something that the guys at the PDC, whoever does their stats, does the crunching of the numbers, will be looking at, because you want to get those best players. And 4 to 5 points between the two Q Schools in the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's a huge gap. If that was to become maybe 10, 15 points, then you'd say, right, we need to look at this, because you've got a lot of players that are better than the EU players missing out on those tour cards. So, yeah, I think it's something that will probably be looked at by the PDC. But at this moment in time, I think we're getting some quality players each year. I think we're doing all right.
And lastly, a question that is just for you from inside the WDF. Just a couple months to go now before the Lakeside returns to hosting a World Championship with the first WDF World Championship. You have a game scheduled against the host of Inside the WDF. How's your prep, though, going for that game? Will you make our show proud?
That is, I'm not sure about that, about being proud, but I'll definitely turn up and play the game. I know that. But we spoke about it on our show, didn't we, when the Lakeside was postponed. It was great disappointment for the organisers, for the players involved. disappointment for us as well, because we were really looking forward to having that game at Lakeside, but hopefully we'll be able to get it on in April. And I think if we'd have played it in January, my form wasn't very good then. It's not as good as it was a few months ago, but hopefully by the time we get to April, I'll have a few more games under my belt and I'll be in good form. And one of the things on my darts wish list for this year was to have that game of in-person darts with Andrew, and also have a game with Matthew Kin and the Darting Nerd, and that is in the diary as well. So I've got 2 opportunities to try and get some bragging rights against Matthew and Andrew. I'll take 1 win out of the 2 games. If I can get 2, that'd be brilliant. I just don't want to go 0-2, because then I think I might have to retire my darts, and maybe you'll have to get someone else to host the show.
Let's hope it doesn't come down to that. But anything else for this week?
As always, we have to say big thank you to our guests for joining us, to Mick, to Scott, to Michael. We appreciate them taking out their time, and thanks to everyone for listening. Our audience is growing and we really appreciate the support. So keep listening and tell your friends about us as well. And it's going to be a busy next week, isn't it? After the Masters, we'll be looking back at it. We'll be looking ahead to the Premier League. The World Seniors Championship is next week, the start of the Pro Tour. So lots to come next week, and we're hopefully going to be a part of the Premier League Media Day next Wednesday. So fingers crossed we'll be able to get a few players on the show next week that are going to be in the Premier League. We don't know the lineup yet, but by this time next week we will, and hopefully you'll be able to hear from a few of them on the show. So until then, enjoy the Masters at the weekend and enjoy the darts.
Yes, indeed. Hopefully we will have Mark Walsh and Co Stomping on next week. Long overdue. Thanks. I guess it's been a while since we've specifically thanked our new listeners, but definitely deserve a shout out to anyone who is joining us as we enter our 6th year. Obviously, thanks to the people who've been with us since day 1, since day 2, and even since day 3 or anywhere in between. Thanks to our 3 guests, and thanks to everyone. We'll be back next week to recap the Masters, look ahead to the start of the Premier League season, look ahead to the start of the Pro Tour season. So much to come so quickly. We just have to hang tight a little bit longer for season 2022 to get underway.